Hello everybody and welcome back for another episode of Mondays with Mundy, and that's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation. We're going to have episode number 2 in a series of videos called Jim's Picks, where I pick paintings and sculpture in the future in the League's art collection and we talk about them. So today, because I'm an historian, I'm going to talk about a history painting. And as it sounds, a history painting is just that. It's a painting that depicts an historical moment in time. And in the League's collection is one of the great ones produced in Philadelphia in the 19th century. Right over here. Painted by Peter Frederick Rothermel, who in the 19th century was Philadelphia's most famous artist, perhaps only behind Charles Willson Peele and Thomas Sully. But let's talk about Rothermel after all. So Rothermel was born in Nescopec, Luzerne County in upstate Pennsylvania in 1812. His family were farmers and innkeepers, and he grew up as a land surveyor. But at the age of 20, in 1822, he came to Philadelphia and became a sign painter. But while he was painting signs, though, he studied drawing and art, drawing under John Reuben Smith, and then painting under Bass Otis, one of Philadelphia's earliest and most successful artists in the city. So in 1824, at this point, he's going to begin his career as an artist, and primarily portraiture in the beginning. But by 1842, he would paint his first really good and recognizable history painting, Columbus Before the Queen, and that would be Isabella in Spain, right before he goes on his great voyage of 1492. 2 years later, he would paint his second, but most memorable for that time period, history painting called De Soto Discovering the Mississippi. So now his career and his reputation are set. He would no longer be a portraitist, but would become a history painter. In recognition of that, in 1847, he was made a director at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Quite an honor for a relatively young artist and man at that point in time. And he would stay a director until 1855. But then in 1856, Rothermel, probably with that wanderlust in him, would go on his own version of the grand tour of European art capitals, in this case, major capitals, London, Paris, specifically Rome. He would spend 2 years in Rome after visiting Genoa and Florence as well. He would come back to Philadelphia in 1859, early 1860, and in 1860, again, in recognition of his reputation, but his skill as an artist, the Pennsylvania Academy named him an academician, the highest honor it could for a teacher within the Academy itself. So it's 1861. What happens on April the 12th? The Civil War begins. Rothermel is pro-union. He is an abolitionist. And to show that, and to show that he was not going to go quietly as the country tore itself apart, he painted this painting to my right, the first reading of the Declaration of Independence. All right? What's the message? The country in the Civil War is now being torn apart over secessionism and slavery. So he wanted to portray the moment in time at which the country came together, right? The reading of the Declaration of Independence itself, July the 4th of 1776, the most famous and important date in American history, all right? So this is Rothermel's attempt at saying, yes, I'm a patriot, and yes, I believe in national unity, and here we are, okay? And he succeeded, didn't he? All right? So 2 years later, on January the 12th of 1863, Rothermel would sign the Union League's Articles of Association and therefore become a founding member of the Union League of Philadelphia. And he would remain a member until the end of his life in 1895. All right. The painting in Rothermel's possession would then appear next in 1864 at the Great Central Fair held on Logan Square in June of that year in the Art Gallery. It was not sold at the gallery, so it went back into Rothermel's possession. And then the next thing we know, in 1867, the painting appears in the possession of the Union League of Philadelphia itself. We're not sure how we got it or exactly when we got it, but it is now ours. And what a great painting to have. So, as you might have heard me mention, Rothermel referred to this as the first reading of the Declaration of Independence. But was it? So can history paintings be wrong, regardless of their intent? It seems as if this was, because people would learn that there were witnesses to the first reading of the Declaration of Independence on July the 4th of 1776 on the front steps of what we now know as Independence Hall. Specifically, Deborah Norris Logan, who was a young girl of 14. Her family home was next door to the State House on the south side of Chestnut Street, and she distinctly remembered hearing a voice reading the great words from that Declaration of Independence. She couldn't see through the crowd to see who it was who was actually speaking. But there were two possibilities, either Charles Thompson, the Secretary of the Continental Congress, or Timothy Matlack, its clerk. Now, nobody could determine that for all those years. But then in 1887, another witness to that event turns up. His name was Anthony Morris, and he wrote an article in Demarest's monthly magazine stating that he specifically saw and heard Timothy Matlack give the first reading of the Declaration of Independence on the front steps of Independence Hall on July the 4th of 1776. So therefore, this is not the first reading, is it? Instead, now, this is actually the second reading, and we know for a fact that this is July the 8th of 1776, which it turns out was an election day in Philadelphia. And what was at stake? Positions or electors to the state constitutional convention. And you can imagine how important that must have been to be in the newest country in the world, with the Declaration of Independence. And now, how is the state of Pennsylvania going to develop its constitution at the same time? So many people wanted to fit those few positions, and one of them was actually Colonel John Nixon. That is he. Colonel John Nixon was the son of, you guessed it, Richard Nixon, who was a shipping merchant, very successful shipping merchant in Philadelphia. He owned Nixon's Pier on the Delaware River. Young John was grew up in his father's business, successful businessman like his father, but was a patriot as well. He believed in the colonies and everything they stood for. He actually joined the 3rd Battalion of Associators during the war itself. And that 3rd Battalion had the nickname of the Silk Stockings because it was made up of men from the upper class of Philadelphia itself. Now, that's not to say they didn't fight. They did fight. Nixon himself was involved in the battles of Trenton and Princeton during the war, and he earned his lieutenant colonelship in that battalion. But he wants to be elected on behalf of the Committee of Safety as a candidate to the state's constitutional convention. So what better place to get some free publicity than to read the Declaration of Independence on this platform in the yard, the backyard as it was called, of Independence Hall. So let's look at the painting. Left-hand side, you can see the south side of Independence Hall itself with the tower that led to the bell tower itself. And this platform, as it was called, to the best of my research, was actually built by the American Philosophical Society to observe the transit of Venus as it moved through the sky in the summer of 1776. But what better place to have a reading for the Declaration of Independence? Now, and as you can tell by the audience here, now this is not the same crowd who listened to the reading on July the 4th. Deborah Logan described that as citizens of the lower order who were not of the most sober or reflective mood that day. These are citizens, though, who are going to vote for those electors to the state constitutional convention, and so these represent the silk stocking people of Philadelphia itself. Now, the most recognizable figure, because I'm sure nobody even knew that was John Nixon, right, is himself, Mr. Philadelphia, the most ubiquitous Philadelphian during the Revolutionary War period, but Benjamin Franklin here in the lower left-hand corner. So, and quite a crowd it is. Some look interested and some particularly don't. But nonetheless, this is one of Rothermel's great history paintings, and we're very lucky to have it here in our collection. So the next time you come down to the Lig, take a look for it. Until June, it will be in the Ballot Box exhibit in the Hewer Room in the Heritage Center, and then after that, the painting will likely move across the hall to the Sander Room, where it was before it was placed in the exhibit itself. It's one of the great history paintings in the city, certainly in the Lig, and it's painted by a Union League member, Peter Frederick Rothermel. So come on down and take a look. Well, that wraps up our episode today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you can come down and enjoy the painting. And on behalf of the Union League Legacy Foundation, thank you very much for participating in the series and listening to me, which can't be the easiest thing to do. So thank you one and all. We appreciate your support, and goodbye.